Yeah, I think people are saying audio's off. Oh, here we go.
Oh, just you though, I think. Yeah, say
Mhm.
something.
I think I can hear myself in stream, but I don't hear Beast. This is
All right,
strange.
testing. How
Yeah,
about
just
now?
you. Oh, there you go.
Any mic now? That's all right. So Streamlabs, for some reason, didn't save my settings. That's unfortunate. All right. Well, let's do it
Seems
again.
good.
Let's roll it back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gunner Heat PC developer stream for August 2020. I am joined by several members of the team. Unfortunately, Kavi couldn't be here in the background today because he has something that he called real life to do. I don't know what that is. We'll be talking about some things that we've been up to during the past month, as well as what we're working on for the next release and beyond. A little bit different from last time. We're not going to be teasing an update that we're dropping right after stream. That was kind of special for last month because we had a lot to do. This time it's going to be more freeform. We're going to have Q&A. We're going to be watching the chat for questions, and we're just going to see where it goes. So, to start off with, we've been doing some very kind of complex work in the background that does not lend itself well to having a bunch of material to show right now. For example, one of the things we've been doing in preparation for AI and combat is getting the fire control systems rewritten because there were flaws in them that would have made it less than ideal to do combat with. So I've been working on a lot of code revisions for leading targets, optic stabilization, fire gating, where if the gun is not able to stabilize correctly, it doesn't let you fire. Things like that. Just features that are in the real tanks that were not in the demo yet. Other members of the team have been working on new models, armor stuff, rendering. We've got a few things to show for that. Any initial thoughts from the team before we jump into it?
Yep, so a lot of work in progress going on. Yep.
Okay. Groovy. All right, so to kick it off, let me see what I've got here for material. We've got a few vehicles in progress. We've already kind of mentioned it before. One we'll start off with that's easy to show is the Bradley. If I can get my video up here. So the thing about the Bradley is we haven't released it yet, even though we have the model basically done, because it needs its own fire control system, optics. It has to have that tow box programmed, all that kind of stuff.
This is kind of reliant on the FCS stuff, isn't it? Because it's
A little
what
bit.
we have now is the sight is sort of tied to the gun, and in the Bradley that
Yes.
can't be the case. Otherwise, it doesn't work at all.
Right. So we can't get the Bradley completely released until the fire control system upgrade is finished. Unfortunately, it was kind of made backward. Whoever the lead developer is messed it up in the first draft. I don't know who that would be.
He's been replaced.
Yeah. So we've gotten rid of him, and now we have me, who never makes a mistake, and I'm redoing that. Yeah, so we'll have things like the toe box not being able to look all the way up and down. It has a limited angle. The animations for deploying and storing, all that stuff. Everything you expect the Bradley to do, it'll do. It just takes time to get all that ready. But in the meantime, I believe I have some footage of it, if I can find it. There we go. Let's go to... Okay, so I think there's a little bit of sound here. Might not come through very loud. So the Bradley is playable in testing. It's just not finished. So there's the model, you know, it stabilizes, it can shoot, but you can see it doesn't have an optic. It doesn't have the tow missiles working yet, stuff like that. I should probably set that to loop and put it back on.
There was some other stuff that changed on it as well since we first showed it. A bunch of people pointed out that I think it was the transmission casing was too big and a couple of other little things, and that's all been fixed up since.
Yeah.
More dynamics have been added, like a lot of animation stuff.
Right, it's hard to see in these shots, but when the vehicle goes over bumps now, the elbow joint for the external sight actually flexes properly. So that little piece of glass that's up on top of the turret, that'll actually stay aligned. I don't have the clip in here of that, but it has animation and rigging from, I think, -9 to +59 degrees, something like that. Just a huge range of motion. Harry was able to find... Yeah, Harry was able to find a way to make sure that works correctly. Let me know if the sound from my desktop audio is too loud or anything, by the way. Because I'm going to be showing more stuff, probably. After the Russian and American vehicles are done, plan for other nations. Yes, I think this is in our FAQ as well, but you know, it makes sense that it would come up again. We're starting off with US, East Germany, and USSR, because those have the biggest opportunities for overlap in vehicle development and for relevance to the Fulda Gap. But we'll be doing all the other important stuff that you'd expect, you know, countries that have a lot of tanks or were involved in a lot of conflicts. So we'll move right on to Germany, UK, probably some other NATO and pact countries. And then in the future, we can start branching out into, you know, stuff that's like, oh, there's some Middle Eastern conflicts, or some specific regional what-if stuff, maybe Korea, you know, those are all kind of in the future. But for vertical slice, we're focusing just on the Fulda Gaps, so we're primarily doing American, Russian, East German.
At the moment, we've pretty much, like, it looks like, at a first glance, it's all American, Russian stuff, but the Russian, quote-unquote Russian stuff that we've made so far is pretty much what East Germany's been using.
Yeah.
At the time. The Russians at this time were using T-80s, T-64s, and I think in the second line some T-62s.
Yeah.
But that's later, mostly because the reason we've sort of put that off is because the T-64 and T-80 is like, it's a little bit harder to get good material on those, and we wanted to make sure we get those very right, because they're sort of iconic, like in the same sense that we, you know, we could have started off doing the Abrams and stuff straight away, but it's like people care about those vehicles like a lot, and they're like, you know, people make models of them growing up and everything, and we want to make sure that they're really, really tight.
Yep. Reason we started off with T-55 and T-72, we had reference available for them right away. We had scans, we had a lot of pictures, we have our subject matter experts had a lot of reference material for us to look at, so we have been able to use those for our initial development. And then actually, as we go through, let me show off this other stuff. We've been able to go back to things that we did before and make incremental improvements to them. So for example, on the T-55, we have the ability now to make other variants, model improvements. Here's a little preview of something that we've been working on. So we have different versions of the T-55. You know, there's slight changes that every country that used the T-55 made to their vehicles, their equipment, and those are some examples of places that they vary. So we have the ability to actually put those in. So whatever country is using the T-55 at the time, it'll be their version of it.
Yep.
And then there's the T-55A without the laser rangefinder, so the earlier version. This is the Czech variant, as an example. It's got different equipment on it. It's got no box over the gun. It's got a new improved model. You know, you got more polygons and the curves, stuff like that. So we've been able to go back and do these kind of tweaks.
Rebake those tracks as well, because they get
Yes.
used on the T72 and the entire G55 line.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of sharing of materials and things like that to keep the file size down for the game. We don't want this to be like a 100 gigabyte download in the end. Nobody really wants that. So we're trying to find ways that we can identify equipment that was shared between vehicles, and we make them kind of have linked file references internally in the game so that you don't have copies of all these things over and over again taking up space.
Or if you end up painting a camouflage scheme on them or something, ideally you only have to do it once and then it propagates to all the different variants. Ideally.
Right. Yeah, so everything will be able to kind of efficiently exist in the game together.
Yeah, we're trying to very efficiently pick like strategic vehicles that will get a lot of use. Like T55 is the most prolific vehicle for a tank in the world probably. So a lot of variants. We get a lot of mileage for our development time when we work on that.
Now sometimes we can't share. So for example, if you go too far in a T55 variant, it no longer has commonality in enough places, so it has to have its own model. But even here, I think some of the texture space is shared.
Yeah, this one is probably going to get repacked. I don't really see a way to do it without... If we were to share parts between the 55 AM and the regular 55s, it's basically because the surface areas are so different, we would be losing a lot of efficiency to reuse the same texture. But I believe we can set it up in a way where if you were to paint your own scheme for it or whatever, it would work through all of them, all the different, even on the 55 AM and stuff.
Yeah, so when we make these real camouflage schemes, we can make it once and then it just applies to every version of that tank.
Yep. Should we? What do you want to say about that? By the way, the whole the paint scheme stuff. Have we talked about that on stream?
Yeah, we've talked about it on previous streams, so we can mention it again.
Well, I mean, how it's gonna work? Are we gonna like user-made ones or?
Oh, I see. I don't think we've actually decided exactly how much is gonna be customizable, like user-made camo. We have the ability to offer different
people. Sorry?
Yeah, we have the ability to offer different realistic ones easily.
Yeah.
And then we're not sure exactly how much user content we'll have a mechanism for. So, nobody wants to see, okay, that's not true. Many people don't want to see, for example, anime skins in their semi-historical campaign. Some people do though, so we have to eventually get into modding and that kind of territory, but it's too early to be able to nail down exactly how far we're going to go with that. So for now, just know that we're going to have customization offered in the game that we've made, and then look into doing modding on top of that later on.
Yeah, and besides, most people probably don't want to get into hand painting textures and stuff, so it kind of works in their favor anyways. It'll be, ideally, if we do have customization for paint schemes, it'll be like pretty user friendly and not too involved.
Yeah, we're going to try to offer enough content by default that you don't need to go crazy with the modding.
I think the best candidate for it would be things like the paint schemes and maybe like they call them tactical icons, the little, you've got a number and then you've got some sort of symbol there. Like those kind of things are probably going to be pretty easy to set up to be customizable. Whether we do it and how we do it is kind of up in the air at the moment. But
yeah, it's too early to nail it down.
Yeah.
But we have these mechanisms that we're working on to provide for those features later on. It gives us more flexibility in development. It gives you guys the chance to do things like that later on. It's just a win-win. So where were we? Things that we've been doing, right? The fire control system upgrades don't necessarily lend themselves well to being shown. I can try to attempt it though. So for example,
you'd kind of have to do a side-by-side for it to be noticeable.
Yeah,
right?
so here's an example of like rearranging at a different distance, and there's like a little shift that goes on. This is because the M60A3 has a locked horizontal axis for the gun sight. It only stabilizes vertically, and so when you range at a different distance, it attempts to keep your reticle and your view on target, but it can't do it exactly. So your horizontal orientation is going to shift just a little bit, and in response the reticle will shift to the side to stay on target. So what you see here is when you rearrange from, this is 800 to 2300-ish, it does a little jump to the side because it's keeping you on target, but it can't keep everything straight. The turret does turn a little bit because of parallax with the gun. It's changed. So this is something that doesn't exist in the current demo, because the current demo, the sight's just kind of slave to the gun, and it doesn't really move, and you have to readjust your aim when you range, and that's not how it's supposed to work. That would be if the stabilizing systems were shut off somehow. So that's one example.
Yeah,
and the
so
other
physically
one,
speaking, or sorry, it's like a mirror in a vacuum, right? You know, you're really looking at a mirror moving very fast.
yes, because the gun and the optic both stabilize toward where you are aiming, and the optic just does it very quickly, so it looks like it's staying in the same place. So here's an early preview of this reticle compensation and leading. So you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but when the tank fires, there's a little jump in the reticle because everything's trying to stay straight as it's getting rocked. But the reticle remains on target. It's point stabilized as the tank's driving, so this is actually really important. In these advanced fire control systems like the M60 has, and then the Abrams as well, when you have a ranged target, and then you drive laterally or whatever, it actually will turn your aim as you go, so you don't have to compensate for the tank moving. So you're not going to get like moving parallel off the target. It's going to stay on exactly where you were aiming. You can see that here as the M60 is speeding to the side relative to this range target. That reticle stays on the target. You fire the shot comes in as it was calculated, and it nails it.
This is kind of where we're going to see the sort of more the intricacies and the differences between the different fire control systems, I think. Like, this is something that the T72 doesn't have, if I recall. They've got like this thing called Delta D, which is like, it's kind of...
Yes. Harry, I think your mic just cut off, but yeah, T72 has the Delta D stabilization, which is very similar to this, but it's a little bit less precise. I believe it only uses the wheel speed and the angle of the turret to kind of estimate from the cosine of the angle how much to shift the aim. So it's fairly good, but it's not always completely accurate. And we don't have that in the T72 just yet. Anyway, let's shift off of this. So yeah, there's a lot of code that goes into this, and you can't see everything that we've been doing visually, so it's been a lot of work, and unfortunately it's just gonna have to wait until the next release to fully show up, and you can see it in motion when you play the demo.
Alright, so we have a few questions if you want to answer. Is the Leopard 2 planned?
I mean, yeah. Germany is going to be added. The Leopard 2 was directly involved in the Cold War, especially in the 80s. So, I mean, yeah, it would be kind of silly not to have the Leopard 2.
And someone's asking for our long-term plans, after release. Are we going to continue to update it? Or are we going to, work on sequels? Or, what's the long-term plan?
Right. So the idea is that, okay, so first of all, I should mention again Vertical Slice. Vertical Slice is a demo. It's going to be free. It will be sometime around the end of this year, hopefully. It will replace the current public demo, the outdated one, on itch.io, and that will be kind of a little preview of what we're trying to go for. Limited set of vehicles, one location, and it would be like, hey, the whole game's going to be like this, but here's a little snip of it. And then we continue working on it. Probably supporters only, continue adding new locations, new vehicles, new gameplay features. And then when we're satisfied with what we've added, we make a full release, a paid game, GHPC. You pay for it up front, you get the content. Then we continue working on it after that for major content expansions, DLCs, expansions, whatever you want to call them, but a similar model. You pay up front, you get a whole bunch of stuff, and no microtransactions, no premium content, the same philosophy we had the whole time. So it is possible that we would continue updating it for 5 years after release. If we have enough ideas and people want to see more stuff and we keep making it, then there will be new content.
All right.
Let's see. All right, so other stuff we've been working on. We've been continuing to work on the armor and internal components for different vehicles. As you guys may know, only the T-55 is shootable in the current demo. It takes a while to work on the other vehicles, and we're very close to getting the M60 done. We're not quite there yet. It wasn't ready yet, but I can show a couple of things.
We're generally, as a general rule, we're working on a lot of stuff. Like, this month has actually been a fairly productive one in terms of stuff being made. But I think we're a little bit shy to show some things unless you're going to be able to play with them sort of soonish.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit mean to be like, oh, this is what we've got, and it's not something that you're going to use in the next month or two.
Yeah, in general, I've been avoiding showing things that are like 3-4 months out, if I can help it. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're working on that I just shouldn't show yet because it would be too much hype too early on. But this is the M60 armor model. This is the thing that you wouldn't see. It's invisible, but it serves as like the collision for shots. It has volumetric armor. It has the mantlet casting. Here's a little piece of the internal components, the after action review models. You might see this is quite detailed. This is the gunner and commander stations in the M60A3 TTS. You'll be able to hit this stuff with fragments or shots and disable it. There's the gun breech next to it. You can see a couple pieces of ammo. Here's a view of the mantlet. We know there's a lot of debate about the M60A3 mantlet. A lot of people think that it's under or overrepresented armor-wise in other games, and there's always threads about sources and adjustments to the materials. We're trying to do it correctly the first time. We've taken great pains to look up all the sources that we can find and model it appropriately the first time. And so all of the armor and internals of the M60A3 will be set up as precisely as we can make them. And I'm not sure it will make a lot of difference in practice because really this tank is chock full of ammo and it doesn't have that great armor for the time period, so it's basically a giant firework waiting to go up. But we will make sure that the actual armor rating of that firework is correct. And,
it might get hit by a 20 mil or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there might be times when your armor saves you. It's not impossible. You might run up against a BMP2 and then, you'd be okay for a bit.
I want to point out, just in case the people on watching the stream might not be playing the Patreon build, there's holes and stuff in the mantlet that you might have thought, what's the deal with that? Like, is it actually modeled? And yeah, you can, in the Patron build, you can actually get like heat jets and stuff down the barrel of the gun. It's kind of insane. And it's probably never going to happen in normal gameplay, but like, yeah, the patrons are just sitting there sort of like doing reps of shooting each other's, out shooting each other's shots. And yeah, we've seen a few of,
we've had people
going down the barrel.
We've had people fire bullets down the barrel. We've had people get shots through like the gun sight opening and the T-55's turret, all that kind of stuff. Because they're all modeled into the armor, correctly. And even though they're not pixel shells, right? We don't have the issue where you can fire a full-size tank round through a machine gun port or anything like that. That's not a thing. But you can still sneak them through a lot of times, especially down the gun barrel. So yeah, that's all modeled. It happens occasionally, and our armor and damage model will be able to handle it when it does.
Trick shots, man.
Trick shots indeed. It just occurred to me that I didn't announce the stream, but it might be a little late for that.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on. Additional stuff we've been working on. We've been optimizing the proving ground. I know a lot of people had issues with running the latest patch. We dumped a lot of expanded distance into that. We had the firing range. So your view distance immediately went up to over 2 kilometers. And that's a lot of extra grass and trees. And we had made some errors in the setup at first. We improved that with the graphics menu, where you can turn down the vegetation distance and things like that. But it was still kind of heavy. We've been improving that with work on the proving ground to change the way the vegetation works, make it run a little faster, use less resources for the same effect. So I'm just going to show a couple of shots. There's a plane flying by in the background. Apologies if that comes up. So here's where it started off. This is the firing range as you have it. We've been adjusting the vegetation and the colors. We kind of improved it a little bit, got the tones closer to what they should be, as well as improved the rendering speed. And then we've been experimenting with a couple of other ideas. Might show up sometime soon. We'll see.
Yep, just getting a feel for how, the lighting might feel at nighttime.
Yeah, because we do have headlights in the M60 that are disabled, that you can't actually use, and it would be neat to have an excuse to turn that back on. So we'll see.
They're pretty easy to add to all the vehicles, actually. It's just the material.
Plus, there's the light up convoy lights on the T-72 and T-55. Do they both
Wait
have
until
it?
you see the East German ones.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of interesting stuff in the works for lighting, and things like blackout lights, convoy lights. It's all going to be in there. So when we get a chance to do a night map, that's kind of like a ready-made improvement for us.
I think, in the past month since the last stream, we've probably spent a good, maybe 1/3 of the time, as far as art pipeline stuff goes, we've probably spent about 1/3 of that just figuring out new ways to approach the environment, because we realize that the environment we got at the moment is kind of just hacked together by people who aren't specialists in that field, and we're really trying to put some time on it now.
Right. It wasn't going to be sustainable forever. And to that end, we have a rather exciting new thing in the works. So here's a couple of teaser shots. This isn't ready yet. It's not going in the next patch or anything, but it's fairly well along. We're not going to be limited to the proving ground for long. We're going to have probably when the combat update drops, the M60 versus T55, we're going to be in a new setting for that.
Yep, so if you're really determined, you could actually find this in Google Earth.
Oh yeah, this is a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer slice of Germany in an actual location that we just chose sort of at random to practice terrain on.
If someone finds it, you should give them access to the next multiplayer test.
Ooh.
There you
but
go.
how many people?
If you could
Let's go
find
with the first
it,
one.
The first one. The first person that finds this will give you access to the next multiplayer test.
And we haven't
Good
told them who made it, so they
luck.
can't cheat.
Yeah, exactly. We have somebody who has significant mapping experience in the past. I'm not going to say who, but they've done ARMA stuff before, and they're working with us now for terrain. So I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be able to do for the actual Fulda map when that comes time.
It's relatively recent, right? Like he's bashed this together pretty quickly, considering.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually amazing. Our mistake early on was trying to start with Unity expertise and go from there and try to find map artists to make the location. What we are doing now is we're using an experienced map artist and just helping him learn Unity. And that's working out much better.
For someone who pretty much picked up Unity this month, we're pretty impressed.
Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. It looks pretty good so far, I think.
This is 2x2. Did we mention that?
Yes, this is 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It's just a little tiny slice of terrain for the purposes of perfecting our workflow and learning what do we need to watch out for when we make the bigger one. So the Fulda Gap is still going to be the main vertical slice location, but we're starting off with this as a little trial run, kind of.
So someone's asking about cities or...
if there are cities in this location, they are replaced by no city. Because we're not ready to do buildings just yet. We're still working on our models for that and our destruction stuff and all that. So, yeah, this setting, this location here, may or may not have a town in it in real life, but it's not included here.
About the cities in general, I think like the best answer for that might be we're not going to commit fully to doing them until we know that we can do them well, and that means things like being able to blow holes in them and stuff.
Yeah,
killing your frames or whatever.
Right. It's always kind of a balancing act, because we don't want to put in something that's unpolished if we can help it. Like, for example, we could put in gray cubes where all the buildings are, but I mean, who wants to play a map where there's a bunch of gray cubes there? We could just put a field there and no one would care. It's we need to have kind of our other models and systems in place before we really go all out on it.
But yeah, and someone else before, kind of relating to the nighttime photo, day-night cycle.
I'm not actually sure if we will have a need for that or not. It kind of depends, right?
Are you planning to play a 6-hour mission?
So the thing about a day-night cycle is it severely complicates the lighting environment and the work that we have to do to set that up.
Yeah. It's doable, but it's also, how long are your missions going to be? And, I mean, I think it's safe to say we'll have different preset times a day.
Right.
But, dynamic, real-time, night cycle, no promise there.
Yeah, so in something like Arma, you have very free-form mission generation, and then it makes sense that there's a day-night cycle because, I mean, you can do anything at any time. You got people doing hours and hours of missions in a stretch. I don't know if that's going to be the case here. This is one of those things where we could add it, but we probably won't add it immediately. It's probably not going to be a thing at first. And then if the need arises, if we decide for gameplay purposes that we need a day-night cycle, then we can always go and add that.
It's kind of like if we were to say, are we going to add the M113 as an ambulance or something? Like, if we can make an interesting game mode out of that makes sense, we'll probably have a crack at it. Like, it's the same thing with night. Like, we won't bother putting a bunch of work onto something if we can't make it fit into the game in a meaningful way. Like, it's a game at the end of the day. It's not just, we're not making a simulator for the sake of a simulator, right?
Right. Yeah, we're not trying to make discount steel beasts. We have kind of a specific vision for what we're doing, and if something doesn't fit that, then why put the effort into it? And then that can develop over time if people really want to see something, or we decide that for the purposes of the gameplay we need to add something, we can always add that. We have that flexibility. Closet Monster stand 2 is at 0415 and you don't roll out until 0840. Yeah, that's
first person watch.
we're not going to have hurry up and wait as a gameplay feature. You can always rely on the actual military for that.
I mean, no one's going to stop you from sitting at your desk, you know.
That's true. That's true. You can just idle. Is that a Roomba? No, that's the top of my mic.
It is a Roomba.
I didn't actually realize that was in the frame. Let's see. What game modes will you have? So this is not set in stone yet. We have a vision. In fact, I'm gonna drop a link in the chat for the most complete statements that we've made on this. It's devlog number 2 at gunnerheatpc.com. We've talked about kind of what we're going for as far as the vision for the game, what kind of gameplay we want. I'll go over it a little bit as well. So the idea is that we want all kinds of vehicles to be fun to play, and to that end they have to have things to do and purposes in the gameplay. So there are going to be situations where you'll be playing a scout and you can just sneak around and spot stuff, and that's going to be useful for your team, and you'll be, rewarded for that. And you're not going to get in direct combat if you can help it, because you're driving a BRDM or something. You're not going to be taking on tanks with that, but you still have a reason to drive it, and you're still contributing to the team. If you're an infantry fighting vehicle or an armored personnel carrier and you have a squad in the back, you're going to have a mission to deploy them to a location to help win the battle. You're not going to be driving around with the Bradley trying to slug it out with tanks necessarily. You might have a mission: go to the town, unload your squad, take this block, and then defend them. If you're a tank, it's not going to be seek and destroy the entire enemy team. You don't have the ability to do that on your own. You're going to be working with your team. Your APCs are going in at this location. You need to defend them because the enemy tanks are going to be trying to take them out, because the infantry inside are going to win the game for your team. So it's going to be kind of like this balance of different roles, and our missions are going to be designed to facilitate that. There might be some missions where it's a traditional kind of multiplayer thing where there's a kind of a contrived game mode, capture the point, whatever, like you're used to. That could still be in. But we want to have some asymmetrical modes. We want to have some more interesting types of gameplay that let different roles have more importance than they would. We don't want it to just be team deathmatch. Whoever has the best gun and armor wins, and there's no point in playing a BMP, So that's all to say we have these philosophies. Those are our motivations. We don't have the actual list of game modes prepared at this time because we have to make them, we have to play test. It could all change. Those are just the principles that are guiding us.
So for perspective on that thing, I remember the other day I was looking for some reference material for the BTR-60. By the way, that BTR-60 you see, the render that came up a couple times, that's the first vehicle in the game that's modeled by someone other than me. So that's a nice little milestone.
Yeah, that's
as
true.
far as the visual one goes, Beast did all the after action stuff, which I'm very grateful for, because that would be way too much work for
right
for one person.
Yeah, but we can't have one person do everything.
Yep. But I remember I was looking for some reference material on it, and there were people asking for it to be added to a game, and a bunch of people responded like, "Well, what's the point? It can't kill tanks." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
we kind of want to avoid having to answer questions like that by, like, it should be obvious, right? Like, you add it because, like, the same reason that it existed in reality, like, it's there because it had a job to do. It should have a job to do in the game as well. And I mean, that kind of contradicts what I said before about like ambulances and stuff, but I guess
it doesn't apply to every role. It's just the kind of combat oriented ones. We have more leeway than just including tanks and things that can kill tanks.
Yeah, realistically, people want to play these kind of games because they want to influence the outcome of some violence, right? Like, and maybe it's hard to make it feel like you're doing that from like an artillery tractor maybe. I mean, we could do missions like that. It's just we got to get all the ones that are really stars of those shows first, I suppose.
Yes. Someone asked about impact visuals. We are working on impact visuals. They're not ready to show yet, but yeah, you'll be able to see where you made holes in the tanks and stuff like that. Ryoki, if you think you found the location of that work in progress map, you can direct message me on Discord, and I'll let you know if you're correct. As I said, the first person who sends us the location of where our teaser map is based will get access to the next multiplayer test. Just a little fun thing.
We don't do multiplayer tests often, so
yeah, it won't be very soon, but we'll put your name down and we'll contact you. Let's see. Which nation's armored vehicles? Warpath, I talked about it a little earlier, but I'll mention again. It's starting with US, USSR, and DDR, East Germany, because that's the main players in the Fulda Gap. That's where we're starting our game. There will be more in the future. We'll be going past the 80s. We'll be going into other areas. So we'll end up including all the major NATO and PAC nations over time. The stuff you'd expect from a tank game. But we don't have the actual full list anywhere.
You can sort of infer what the next steps are going to be based on the stuff that we add per theater, so to speak. Like if we add the stuff from one theater, there's going to be a considerable overlap with a few other theaters, and it's probably going to be one of the ones that has a lot of overlap with.
Right.
Like we're doing basically the Centag in the 80s. That was the name of the region that we're sort of depicting, and then there was the North Ag as well, and most of the content could be pretty much reused one for one if we were to do that theater. So it's an obvious near future step, but it adds in things like the English, the Belgians, the Dutch.
Yes. I do want to let me check really quick for more questions, but I also want to show a couple of things that are upcoming that I think you guys will enjoy. So let's see.
Someone's asking about like artillery support, airstrikes.
Yeah, airstrikes. There will be AI controlled aircraft, and there will be player controlled anti-aircraft, SPAA. We think that'll be a cool gameplay element. Being able to use those systems, not just aiming down a gun sight and trying to spray ahead of the plane, but actually using like their lock-on systems, their radar. If we can pull that off, that would be very cool. I think things like the Shilka or the Vulcan, the M163, they don't really get a good showing in a lot of games because they're gamified to the point of not being that good anymore. But we might be able to do them justice here. It would be really cool to see.
The way those like search and track radars work is really to me that's perfect gameplay material for the kind of thing we're doing. It'll be a shame if we didn't get to it at some point.
Yeah.
I hope we just don't run out of money before we get there. That would be nice.
Right. Yeah. I guess I should plug the Patreon again. Patreon.com/GunnerHeatPC. It's the only source of funding for us right now. We don't have publisher deal or investors or anything. It's all Patreon plus out of pocket. And we're trying to get the vertical slice done on whatever crowdfunding we can manage so that we can attract more attention and more funding for the full game. But we're basically relying on the community to continue keeping the project alive at this point. So if you're able to, we'd really appreciate if you could help out with that. And you get access to the work in progress vertical slice build. It's still rough around the edges right now, but you get everything as we add it. And we usually do at least one major update to it a month. So you're not just paying into it and getting nothing. You're getting in early. You can access special channels on the Discord, give feedback directly to us. We interact more with the patron channels, things like that. So you'll be very involved in the development for that contribution. We really appreciate that.
Yep. And someone's asking about classified information, what sort of stuff. And so a good chunk of our sources are kind of crowdsourced, but we're staying within operational security, right? So
yes,
not asking anyone to do something silly.
Yeah, so at some point, like, as much as we'd like to say everything we put in the game is sourced and backed up by real data, we can't do that for legal reasons for everything. So at some point we have to rely on educated guesses. And we try to limit how much we do that. If we have sources available, we use them. We're not going to go, for example, we're not going to use formulas for armor penetration if we have a source available. I know that some games have switched to using formulas for everything. I don't think that's the right approach, but we'll mostly be relying on data where we can find it. Where we can't find data, we extrapolate from data we do have. We find combat reports or test results that let us infer the performance, and then we go from there. What else?
I guess a simplified version would be like, we might not know what's inside the Abrams, the newest one or whatever, right? I mean, some people probably have a pretty good idea, but
Yeah.
if we don't know, we will be like, okay, well, we know what this version of it had in there, and we know it's probably better than that. So it's, it's got to be better than what it was before, but maybe not as good as something else. Like, it'll be, I guess, comparatively, like, you can sort of fill in the dots.
We can ballpark performance even when we can't find actual numbers. So it shouldn't be a huge deal that we can't find classified data. Plus, our gameplay is not focused around pixel hunting meta, or the armor on this tank is 50 millimeters thicker than the tank it faces. It's not fair. Like, that's not going to be a thing. We have so many different roles and so much going on in these large maps we're planning on having. It's probably not going to be an issue if your armor is 50 millimeters, 100 millimeters different from what it should be. Like, you're not going to be thinking about that. You're going to be the tank on the battle, and you're going to be doing tank things. Like, it's not going to be a slugfest between the Leopard and the Abrams, and people arguing about how much the wedges do on the Leopard. That's not going to happen. All right. What else?
In reality, you shoot center mass, right? And we should probably, like, if we do our job right, we will create all the same conditions that will make it beneficial to shoot center mass instead of trying to trick shots.
And plus, we won't have this, like, sniper scope gameplay going on. In fact, I'm going to pull up the fire control thing again. See if I got the correct video. Yeah, there it is. So again, this is we have our fire control systems. I mean, they're modeled after the real vehicles. Every gun sight is different on every tank, so you're gonna be moving and shooting. You're gonna be doing all these kind of maneuver focused things. You're not gonna be sitting there worrying about lining up that dot on the exact portion of the enemy tank. I mean, sometimes you'll be able to, but usually you'll just be focused on getting the first shot off, because that's kind of what wins battles, right? You start shooting first, and yeah. So it's going to be a completely different kind of flavor or pace of gameplay, and the meta of what exact armor rating is going on and head-to-head tank comparisons is probably not going to be as important here.
Speaking of hitting armor, I think Harry has a pretty good work in progress screenshot you might want to show.
Oh yeah?
Wait,
for
what?
hits. Or,
sure.
Where can I find that?
We're a bit behind
round
now.
Table?
Yeah, round table.
All right.
Someone asked about impact effects a bit back. Sorry.
Gotcha. Where are we? Okay, there it is. I will show that briefly.
This is my my budget ZBrush skills.
All right, let's pull that up. Let's get that on screen.
So we need to still figure out the implementation details of how we're going to do this, but artistically, we've got a prototype.
Yeah, so here's an example of different impact effects that we're working on. Phoenix asked, was auto lead a thing back then? Yes, the M60A3 TTS had a very advanced fire control system. It was very similar to one that was on the early Abrams, actually, It had auto lead, it had thermals, it had point tracking, stabilization. You could drive around and it would keep aiming at the same thing. That's what was in that clip there. So these tanks are going to feel very different from each other. We haven't really had the opportunity to show that off yet, but when you're doing combat, it's going to matter what kind of vehicle you're in. You're going to have a completely different set of tactics available if you're in an M60 versus a T55. The T55 is going to have to be probably parked to get accurate fire. The M60 will be able to drive around, and it has stabilization of the gun and the optic. It has fire gating. It has this point tracking. It'll be able to move and shoot to a much higher degree. So things like that will matter significantly. And I'm actually very excited for the combat.
Brought all his cousins too.
Say again?
Sorry, I talked. The guy in the T55 brought all his cousins as well.
Yes.
Yeah, you gotta remember that. Where there's one, there's more.
Right, that's the thing. We're not necessarily limited to having like equal numbers of tanks on each side. We could make it asymmetrical to make up for one team's optics being better or whatever. Will we have T-72 derivatives like the M84? Probably, eventually. Did HRC put you up to this? We have somebody who asks about the M84 all the time, so yeah. I'm sure we won't forget about it.
We would never put the M84 in the game without being able to do it full justice by putting the barrel into the detent position while it reloads.
Yes.
Not until we get that right.
And working on the fire control systems is going to allow us to disconnect the gun from the optics in that way. So the last piece of the T-72's reload animations, besides the aft cap ejection, is going to be having that barrel lock at 3.5 degrees during the reload and then go back. And that will be possible very soon. So don't worry, guys, the game is saved. The T-72 will be able to do gun lock. Do we plan to do interiors? Yeah, when we have enough time and money, sure. We can't do it yet. That's a lot of work. It's hundreds, maybe thousands of hours to do a good tank interior. We cannot afford that. No way.
And we don't want it to be slap on, like, here's your interior, have fun. It's like, it's got to play right. It's not just a cosmetic bullshit thing. So yeah. That's a lot of work, and we can't really promise that just yet. We need a game first.
I mean, as I showed before, the most interior we can muster right now is stuff that you should be able to damage with your shots. So like, here's part of the M60's internal components. There's some panels there, but that's not enough for an interior. We need a lot more work in order to do that.
We'll probably phase that stuff in because we also don't want to get into a situation where it's like, okay, we'll do the interiors, we'll commit to doing the interiors, and that means we have to if it's 1,000 hours per, right? Let's say it's 1,000 hours per interior, which it probably isn't, but high watermark is probably about 1,000 hours for each of them. And that would mean that we're going to have a lot of time spent with some vehicles having interiors and some not, and that would kind of almost, I don't know, it probably depends on what kind of player you are, but I think in a way that would almost detract more from the gameplay than having none at all, like having them uniformly detailed or undetailed.
Kind of tricky to know exactly how to set it up, but we don't want to get distracted. We don't want to get into this path of like, oh, we accidentally became a study sim. Like, we're not trying to do that. If we put interiors in, it'll be in a very directed fashion. We're not going to have full switchology. We're not that kind of game. Will there be tank trees of different countries? We're not exactly sure how much research tree type stuff we want to do, but basically no grind ever. So if there are research trees, it'll be more of like a qualification thing. Like, you prove that you can handle this tank, and then you get better access to it, or you get quicker access to it in missions or something. We're not going to do a thing where you're locked out of combat of content for not having done a grind. Like, that's not going to exist in this game. We have no paywalls, we have no grind walls, no premium content. That's not how we're trying to monetize it. So there's no point in having a research tree that prevents you from playing, let's say, the M1A2 until you're 100 hours into the game. Like, that's not going to happen.
I think the I don't remember if you mentioned this on stream or if it was only in our chats, but there were one scheme you mentioned that seemed like it would work was if there's a multiplayer mode or whatever, or a given multiplayer mode, and say there's you can jump into a vehicle or whatever. Some of the really higher priority, higher value vehicles might be locked to, well, not locked, but if you are more qualified on that vehicle, you might get your first choice in it.
Yes.
Rather than have two people sort of fight over who
right.
gets it.
So if there's somebody who's brand new to the game and there's somebody who has time in the game and has qualified on the Abrams, for example, and you start a mission, the Abrams slots might be open to the Abrams players more quickly, so that you don't get somebody jumping in with no experience and taking the Abrams and then they can't do anything with it. That would be something we'd consider in place of a research tree. It's kind of like the reverse. You always have access to it, but you get access to it more once you've proven yourself on that platform. And that's just for the sake of the gameplay. It's not for limiting you, trying to make you spend a bunch of time and money playing GHPC. That's not the motivation.
I guess that it also sort of, for the people who really want to play the hard hitters, it might add some meaning to playing some of the scout vehicles and stuff like that. Like if you can't see much point to driving around in the BTR, if you want to ride the T80 all the time, it might be like, okay, I get more, I can get myself more T80 hours, or more. If you're playing a campaign, for example, maybe you get more T80s deployed or something based on that. Oh no, he's shown it. Here we go.
I am leaking the Abrams. We have a lot of content that's in the pipeline that's not ready. Why does the gun barrel look so small? Yes, it's because it's 105 millimeter. This is the M68. They did not have the M256 ready, the 120 millimeters, so this is the M1 IP. It was the last small gun Abrams, and it's going to be the first one added to GHPC. Of course, we're working on the M1.
Luggage.
Yes, it does have Alice packs and MREs and all that stuff. And we'll be working on different configurations of decoration as well. But for now, yeah, it's, we're doing a lot of interesting work on it. We've got, armor pieces and things like that. Everything's being modeled very carefully. So there'll be some nice upcoming content for that.
Oh, someone asked about camo nets.
Camo nets. It's possible. We've done some experiments
on everything.
Have made camo nets. I just need to figure out how we're going to apply them. That's all.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it was pretty much. I think it was only the West Germans using them at this point, and I think there's the Soviets had something that looked different, but did the same thing. Don't know.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff. It requires us to make new systems behind the scenes to actually have it work. So like a camo net, we have to decide exactly how that works. Is it included in the model? Are we generating it from some kind of layout based thing? Are we making it for each vehicle? What's the time required for that? So there's a lot of considerations. We have ideas, we know about camo nets, we'd like to see them in the game, but we have to prioritize our effort. Our man hours go into different things. So right now, while we're still trying to get the new version of the game to the same level of gameplay as the old one, the outdated public build, we can't really take the time to do a lot of that stuff. We can mess around, but it's not our primary concern. All right, what else? Let's see if I have any other stuff that I was gonna mention here.
Some people are asking about, what kind of vehicles, like recovery vehicles. What sort of soft targets will there be?
Yeah, so we have room in the gameplay for other kinds of vehicles besides tanks and tank killers, but I don't know if recovery vehicles specifically will make it in. That's one of those things that we're still kind of debating on internally, because we're not sure how useful they'll be in the context of missions. Maybe in a campaign or something, if you recover stuff, you get it back and that helps your inventory. But I mean, we have to figure it out. It'd be work to add those vehicles. Will that pay off? Will it be valuable enough that we should work on recovery vehicles instead of, making more combat vehicles, for example? So we'll see. We still have to figure some of these things out. We don't have an answer to every single thing yet.
I think we can definitely make the personnel carriers play in a way that people will actually use them. It kind of comes down to the amount of development time we spend on something versus how much use our user base will actually get out of it. And I think it would be really, really cool to do all that logistics and stuff, but I'm just not sure. I don't know if we'd be able to get people playing it much. I feel like they'd still just gravitate towards the stuff that has a little bit more of a dynamic thing going on. Maybe we could just put in some missions that are just be a trucker on the Fulda Gap, maybe people would enjoy that.
Euro Truck Simulator, Gunner Heat PC edition.
Yep. We will do trucks. We did have a truck, but it was just I accidentally modeled a truck that wasn't really common in the 80s, and now we have to make a different one.
Yeah. So here's an example of stuff that we're working on that's not ready yet, but just so you can see the sheer amount of stuff we have to think about. This is kind of thermal rendering mode and trying to work on how materials are represented in thermal view. Yep. We found ways to kind of partially generate this from the physically based material sets that are already on the vehicles, plus some manually set up heat maps and stuff like that.
Yeah, so if people aren't familiar, there's something called the metalness workflow, which is what we use. So basically, artists like Harry, they sort of dictate what parts of the vehicle are metallic and how polished they are, how rough they are. And so instead of having to manually create, thermal textures for every vehicle, we can automate some of it. So in real life, when you have polished metal, it actually appears kind of cold in thermal because it's a reflection. So just like with normal light, polished metal kind of acts like a mirror in the thermal spectrum. So even though a vehicle could be hot, you could have parts of the vehicle that appear cold just because they're reflective. And we got all sorts of stuff going on here, showing off the trees and sky. So kind of just trying to show it's not just a black and white filter. Like the sky will have different thickness and such in the thermal spectrum, so it kind of appears a little bit darker.
Right.
Yeah, like the tracks on this, they appear kind of cold because they kind of got some polished metal on them. It's not finalized. This is kind of just an approximation.
Yeah, and the stuff like the tracks, it would be a lot warmer if the vehicle was driving. Like the actual heat map would take over. This is when the vehicles are parked and completely cooled, their metal properties start to matter a lot, and if you have high contrast on the thermals, you'll start to be able to pick that out. But if they're in motion, if they're warm, they're going to appear, glowing like you'd expect, and the gun systems would heat up when they're used and all those things.
Yeah, that's something we should probably point out. Waffle's done a really good job of setting up. It's basically unlimited heat sources, isn't it, or effectively unlimited?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
got
talked about it before.
Weapon that fires.
Yeah. I can show that again. We have separate zones. Let me pull that up. We have separate zones on the heat maps, separate influences. Every weapon system, the engine, the tracks, that they can all heat up separately at different rates and be controlled, so that they appear in the thermals correctly. Let me find the video of this.
Yeah. If you've played Arma 2 in the past, I don't know if Arma 3 is updated, but kind of a small thing, but you'd fire the main cannon and all of your machine guns would be red hot, and it was a little silly. So, we can have it so it's not like
unplayable.
That. Literally unplayable. But
so this is an
it's
example.
just a small detail.
This is an early test that we did where we just had gun barrel, wheels, and engine, and this is a placeholder model. This isn't a leak of our T90. This is just a random model.
Yeah, random
it's almost
model.
a year old.
So
very old.
Yeah. So the point here is that we have all of these heat sources changing independently, and then the thermal map of the vehicle reflects that. So we're not limited to just having the tank glow in thermal sites. We're not limited to having one appearance for it in the heat map. We can do basically any kind of separate influence that we want, and that's going to be very useful when thermals are added in.
Yep. Also, not implemented yet, but we were kind of pointed out to us in the past by a kind of a thermal expert, is right now really only considering like engine heat, but a big factor will also be environmental heat. So like time of day, when your engines are turned off, the major factor in how hot a vehicle is just the ambient temperature, what sort of humidity, that sort of stuff. So
Yes.
we're not saying like full-blown weather simulation and stuff, but you know, the basics.
Yeah, we've gone into great detail before for things. It wouldn't be unheard of. We're trying to make it look correct. Like it's so far on a different level than what you see in the public build right now for thermals. The public build just has every piece of the vehicle is a fixed temperature. There's no blending. There's no change. This is a full simulation of heat propagation in those vehicles and the way the materials will look. It will be a very authentic appearance by the time it's finished. So we're excited about that.
And then you get to look at it through a pixelated, horrible optic.
Yes, you get to use a
On the
early
CRT
80s thermal
scan
sight. Actually, I guess the ANVSG2 on the M60A3 was fairly decent. Better than what the early Abrams had. They downgraded the thermals when they did the Abrams.
Yes.
It took them some time to get back up to that standard even.
Yep, gunners complained about it. It was a downgrade, but
Yeah.
pretty sure it's pretty expensive, so yeah.
What else can I leak? I don't know if I want to leak everything. We've got different stuff going on here.
Should we just tell them what is likely to be in the next patch? I'm not even totally sure.
Yeah, so the next patch, the thing is we don't know when the next patch exactly is coming, like down to the day, because we want to make sure everything is not broken that we're releasing, but we're going to have a bunch of optimization updates. There's been some bug fixes and things that have gone on. Those of you who are on the MBT tier have seen the Git feed, so you know when we do a final merge of a new feature, when it goes from like our localized dev branches to the actual master. So you know that we've done a bunch of little improvements in the meantime while we've been working on the big stuff. I want to get the fire control system changes in. Hopefully that'll happen. There's still some glitches in them because it's such a complex interaction of moving parts, and it's developed so that it fits different kinds of tanks. So the M60 uses it, the T72 uses it, the T55 technically uses it, but it's on fixed mode because that gun sight is attached to the gun. So it's got to be modular and able to work with all these different types of stabilization and everything. So it's complicated. Long story short, I'm trying to get it ready soon so the patch can go out with new gunnery stuff, maybe some moving targets, things like that. But we're trying to get ready for the big thing, which is next month. We're going to attempt to add the combat back in some kind of simple form, probably M60 versus T55, probably one mission, but you'll be able to shoot stuff. And to that end, we're working on all the systems that matter for combat and gunnery, trying to make sure that they're polished properly. Yes, violent seduction. The internet is indeed a series of tubes. That is wisdom from the elders. What else? We're at the end of the planned time for the stream. This has been pretty chill, but we got any more questions? More map images, please. No, Perf on Hark, we can't just give away the show. Plus, it's a work in progress.
He's gonna stand there in real life.
He's gonna stand there in real life. Yeah.
You can go to Germany, and there you go. That's the map.
Mm-hmm. Crew XP, crew training, crew vulnerability, and crew bailing. Okay, so good question. Will crew be persistent with their experience, and will they be able to bail out to preserve an experienced crew? That's an idea that we really like, and we've been kind of toying with it. It might not be relevant to every kind of mission. There might be some where you just drop in and you have a pre-made crew set, some kind of historical scenario, and it doesn't matter. But if we do have persistent crew, which I think is likely, it will matter. If you recover them, you'll be able to hang on to their experience. It'll be very important. Like if you guys have played XCOM, you have like your persistent squad members, and if you lose them, they're gone. Something like that might end up making its way into Gunner GHPC in some form. And then it will actually be important to take care of, medical stuff, or evacuate the vehicle from the battle, or bail out of the tank if it's lost, a much different kind of pace than charging in, and then if you get in a bad situation, you J out and you do something else. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
I think most of us are pretty interested in the idea of kind of like almost a tankers RPG, right?
Yes.
Like sort of XCOM, FTLE kind of thing. Like the dudes are your main thing that you care about.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's something that we've been experimenting with in kind of the conceptual stage, and we won't be able to really see how it works until we get into we have basic gameplay available for you guys, and then we start prototyping game modes. We're not quite there yet.
Lab asks, what are our plans for multiple players in a single tank? Sorry to cut
Yes.
you off there, Josh.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Thank you, Beast. We are going to have multi-crew. That's one of the big goals that we've had from the beginning. It's not going to be forced. It'll be an option. You can still lone wolf a tank. But if you want to go sit in a tank with your friends and yell at each other to aim over there and all that stuff, we know that's fun. We've done that in other games, and we want it here too. It's a good feature. We're going to try to add it as soon as we can. I know I'm looking forward to Gunner GHPC developer multi-crew, where I suddenly go full tryhard and start doing fire commands, and everybody's like, "What?"
I hear you guys playing Arma.
Yeah, we definitely do it in Arma already.
I heard
I'm just shaking my head.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've definitely yelled Gunner GHPC in Arma before, unironically. Okay, so what else? There was another question. Illumination flares. Interesting. We're working on things like smoke. I think flares would be another feature kind of like that, where it's like visibility stuff in the battlefield. We're looking into it. It's not ready yet. We haven't done flares yet. We've done some smoke, but rest assured, we know about those things, and we'll be implementing as many as we can reasonably manage, and that actually matter in the context.
That's an interesting point, actually. Like the smoke mortars at this time were a little bit kind of. I think the Eastern Bloc guys use something quite different to NATO. NATO were using like red phosphorus, I think, and the Soviets were using cheeky breeky powder, and they burn quite differently, and the thickness of the cloud and how quickly the cloud actually deploys is kind of different, and the shape of the cloud. So it'll be quite interesting to see like whether one's more advantageous, I guess. Like a red phos grenade basically pops in the air and makes a screen in front of you almost straight away. The Russian ones, I think they're a little bit thicker, but they take a longer time to deploy.
Yes, and we're tweaking that based on videos of the actual grenades and input from people who have actually had experience with it. Someone asked about Gen 1 night vision. Yeah, if you play the public build, actually, there's Gen 1 night vision on the T-72M. If you play the night mission, Night Brawl, you can see that in action. You can use the Luna Spotlight. You can get spotted for turning your light on in view of the enemy, things like that. And that's going to be in this version of the game as well when we get around to adding night stuff. It'll probably look even better than it did in that one. And there will be more types of optics in play, thermals and all that.
I'm super excited for that, because in my opinion it looked really good even in the public build where everything else looked kind of meh. I think we can pull off something really, really nice with that Gen 1 night vision stuff.
Right. Once you get into a gunner's sight, it doesn't really matter as much what the models are like and the daytime shading. Like you're in a completely different kind of visual world, and it's such a different feel to it. You're right, we're definitely going to have that back in. That's an easy win and also something we wouldn't miss.
It's where we get to just say, wahoo, let's put about 1,000 post-processing effects on it until it looks really cool.
Yeah. It actually doesn't take that many to make it look good. That, like, I think there were maybe 3 things happening in that previous one. Vehicle deployment cost and limiting the amount of vehicles per team. That's something that we don't have set in stone. You know, like anything else, it's going to change rapidly once we start playtesting. So we have an idea that the teams won't necessarily be symmetrical. You might have more vehicles on one side than the other. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the type of game mode. Is it attack and defend? Is it a contrived head-to-head PvP kind of thing? Is it PvE? So, I mean, it really depends. We still have to try different things and see what works. I'm waiting for you have Gen 3 thermals. That's what you want. Oh yeah, I was reading Lab's comment. Yeah, the M60A3 is going to be really powerful actually at night. I think people are going to be, well, I guess if you've tried other games, you might know, but thermals are going to be extremely powerful for spotting purposes. And yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes. So what were we going to say, Harry?
I think it's easy to get stuck into this sort of mindset of equipment versus equipment and who's going to win or whatever, but it's like the thing you got to keep in mind is it's not a deathmatch game. I mean, we might have a deathmatch component to it, but that's fundamentally not what it's about. And you might have the best thermals in the world, but if you have to engage 4 targets at once, you're still going to lose. Some scenarios might even be basically, here's your job. We know that you can't win. You can't do this. You just have to try and not lose everything. Like try and run home with your tail between your legs and actually, get there without it being a total catastrophe, rather than you have to be the hero and win the whole war sort of thing.
Right. We got a clarification. Limiting the amount of people using a specific vehicle in one team. That is possible because one of our ideas that we've talked about before is that the vehicles will exist whether players crew them or not, and when you spawn in, you'll be taking an AI vehicle that already is in the battle. Yeah, so to that, yeah, there will be probably a specific number of different vehicles, and when you decide you want to jump in a T-72, you've taken one of the 8 T-72s in that scenario, and if a bunch of people want to take the other T-72s, then there's no T-72s left. That's definitely something that could happen.
A lot of the ideas that we've sort of thrown around have been pretty similar, if anyone's familiar with the dynamic campaigns in IL-2. I think DCS has some of that stuff as well. Like they have basically scenario generators that are based on some sort of abstracted how much capacity one team has to put out instances of one vehicle or whatever.
Yeah. Norphoenix asking about will there be different locations than Germany/Fulda Gap? Yes. Not in the vertical slice. The vertical slice, for those who don't know, is the free demo that we're putting out around the end of the year that will show kind of what the game's intended to be and will be used to attract more funding and let us develop a full game. So the full game will have modern stuff eventually. It'll have different theaters of combat. It'll have different nations. But for now, it's going to be Fulda Gap, US, East Germany, USSR. That's our focus. We're keeping it limited. That allows us to know what we need to develop better and keep our efforts productive and efficient. And so there will eventually be other nations, but not very soon. You'll be seeing mostly Fulda Gap stuff for the near future. Okay. Take the last couple questions because we're going toward an hour and a half now, and that's about the end. What will you need to do after a tank breaks down on the battlefield? We're not going to have easy repairs. It's not going to be 30 seconds to fix your completely messed up tank and get back into it. We think it's going to be focused more on if you get hit, if your crew are wounded and your tank's damaged, your mission will shift to getting that tank out of danger and recovering it. And we're going to try to find ways to motivate that, because in a real battle, you're not going to sit there with a tank that's half broken and on fire and say, oh, if only I can get 3 more kills, it'll be worth it. That's not how people work. So we might have something like you get a refund on your spawn points if you recover the tank, or in the case of missions of persistent crew, you get a chance to keep the crew alive, keep their experience, instead of having to roll new ones. So we're still working on the exact mechanics of that, but we definitely don't want to have it focused on easy recovery from damage and, just jumping back in with a repair kit and you're good to go. If anything, you'll be focused on recovering or abandoning a vehicle and then switching to a different vehicle on your team to continue the fight. And that's something that we've kind of mentioned before as well.
We want you to feel like your heart has been ripped out when you lose a vehicle or the boys get hurt, We want to play with your emotions.
Yeah, they shouldn't feel disposable, but we also don't want to make it too punishing. There's kind of a balance that has to be done there. Towing? Yeah, hopefully. That's a physics issue.
There's already a tow in the game.
There is a tow in the game. Oh, I completely forgot about that.
Shown.
Yeah, we've been making some improvements to ATGMs while we work on these other more core features. So let me go back to screen view here.
But yeah, in the meantime, people are asking about damage, recovery vehicles, things like landmines. We're not certain, but it's kind of like we want, if we have those things, we're probably gonna need vehicles to fill those roles. And if we have vehicles in those roles, we probably need things like landmines, but I don't know if we could promise.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry for the cursed sound on some of these, but we have different animations. We have a thing, it's called blend shapes, where you have little pieces of a model that are able to morph between different states. We've included them on our ATGMs now, so the next patch of the Patreon build is going to have these missiles that have all of their fins and everything folded in when they're launched, and then they deploy afterward. This one that we just showed with the front view of the tow, that the timing's wrong. We've changed that. But we have like the stabilization jets out the side. We have the nose probe that extends on the eye-tow. We have the fins wrapped around the body on the 9M111 that will expand. So it's all that stuff. The spin guidance as well for the Russian one. So this is all kind of little visual improvements that we've done kind of on the side while we're messing with these core features.
You guys better like this, by the way, because I was so excited when I found out that I could actually make that missile have curly boy fins. I've never seen it in a game before.
It's and I don't know how often anybody's going to actually look at that in slow motion to see it happen, but if they do, it's there.
AAR might kind of matter,
Yeah, that could, once we do animated after action, we could have that for sure. Okay.
But pretty much all the missiles will be able to be animated properly. It's the way we've sorted it out. I can pretty much just set it up very easily inside the 3D modeling package, and Josh just turns a button.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if you noticed in one of those, the missile was visually in the tube. You could see it until it was launched, and then it was gone. I know in the current demo, the tubes are empty, and then the missiles just appear when you fire. Now you can see them stored and packed in the tube until you fire, and then they reappear when it's reloaded. So little steps toward visual realism as we go. And that's kind of like what I was saying before. As we have time and as we learn new things and optimize our workflows, we're able to go back and improve previous features on the side. So by the time Vertical Slice comes out, we'll have some pretty nice stuff, I think. We'll have a pretty good set of visual assets and detail features. Already there's more stuff than you can see, like the ballistics model taking into account the air pressure and the weather and quadratic drag and all this stuff, propellant temperature. You know, it matters how hot the round was when you fire it. All this stuff. It's like you can't even see all of it, but it's all there. We're trying to get sim quality ballistics, armor, gun sight systems, and then the rest of it is a game. We got that blend.
We're gonna lock it up behind a Candy Crush interface, though.
maybe not quite that simple, but yeah. Active protection systems. Yes, they will be implemented.
That'd be pretty late game, though, right?
It will be pretty late game because there aren't any vehicles that have active protection systems in our current time period. It will be later on when we get to the 90s and the, more modern stuff.
Yeah, like before someone was asking, when do I get to play the latest Abrams? And we're trying to go chronologically, so
yeah,
probably a bit.
Like, we're not going to add the T90M and the M1A2 SEP V2, next month. That's not going to happen. We're going kind of in order, and as we develop new vehicles, they provide the foundation for the later versions of them. For example, now that we've got the model for the M1IP, and I'll pull that up again because it's nice to look at, we will be much more easily able to work on the M1A1, which we already are. And then after that, we'll have most of the foundation for the M1A2. And then we can work on the M1A2 SEP. And then you go down this line, this progression. The T72A, we turn that into a T72B, we turn that into a T72B3. It all kind of moves ahead. Yep. How demanding will this be for our personal computers? Hopefully not too bad. Optimization is always a work in progress. If you're on the Patreon build, you're going to occasionally get patches that run terribly, and then they'll be improved later on. That's just kind of part of the process. When you sign on to the Patreon builds, hopefully it's understood that what you're playing is a very work in progress product. It's not a polished thing. We release stuff as we're able to complete it, and you're getting an early preview before it's considered ready for everybody's mass consumption.
Yep. And as far as hardware requirements go, we're really going to try to go by what the majority has. And so, we're not going to be prioritizing silly stuff like RTX, sorry, but,
Ray tracing is the future, but it's not very dev friendly yet, as far as we're concerned.
It's not our future.
Yeah, we do what we can, though.
We're still basically 5 developers that might turn into some more ongoing relationships with some more developers, but it's still 5 of us running on. You can see exactly how much money we make off this, so it's kind of manage your expectations. We try our best.
Yes. Happiness 1815, will you be able to transport troops in vehicles like BMP2 and Bradley? Yes, you will. That will be a big part of their focus, their role in the game, because we know that if we do purely a kill-based gameplay, then what's the point of playing anything besides a tank? You're going to have less armor, you're going to have probably less weaponry. But if we have it so that you can win a mission by deploying infantry to the right place and defending them, all of a sudden the AFVs become massively important and the tanks turn into guards for them. So we'll be able to have game modes that fit different types of vehicles, as we mentioned before. So APCs, IFVs, they will be able to shine in their intended roles instead of being kind of glass cannons or missile launchers that harass tanks. All right. Well, I believe that's all the time we have. So, thanks to everybody who joined in. Thanks to the team for being on board. Hopefully, Kavi's doing well with his real life obligations, whatever that is. I still don't know what real life is. That's weird. He should be in that chair right there right now. I don't know. I'll have to talk to him about that.
Did you have feed him this morning?
Leak or two, don't we?
Say what? Harry,
Oh, don't we have another couple of things to leak?
you wanna do some
Depends.
last minute leaks?
Well,
I
maybe
don't
we should
know.
do
If
some
people want
Patreon
to look at pictures
exclusive.
of. Yeah, we could do that. We could do a chat.
We
with
could do
Patreon
Patreon
exclusive.
exclusives.
Ooh.
All right, I'm gonna hold
Wait.
back on the last couple things, the juiciest ones.
They're not the juiciest.
No,
They're kinda
okay,
juicy.
they're a little juicy. Yeah, we'll talk to the patrons about it then on Discord. You know, we gotta have some incentive
Trying
for
hard to get.
joining Patreon. This is completely crowdfunded. I can sit here and be nice all day, but we need the money too. All right. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining. The VOD will be up for 2 weeks or whatever the Twitch limit is, and then it'll be on YouTube within the next couple of days permanently, and we'll have chapter annotations, and you know, I can pin a comment there or whatever. Same as the previous streams. Maybe next time I'll remember to ping everybody when it goes live and we can break 50 viewers, but this was cool and casual, so that's fine too. All right, and hope everybody has a good day, and see you next time.